Dr. George Neeley, the Executive Vice President at Fisk University. And Dr. Neeley, before we had our first commercial break, we were talking about the relationship between Fisk University and some of the faculty and other matters. Let's continue that conversation and give you an opportunity to enlarge upon that if you so desire.
Okay. Let me give you an example which probably will summarize this rather succinctly. When I came to Fisk, one of the persons that I met was a man whose name was Theodore Courier. He was professor of history. He was Harvard trained. He was responsible for a lot of the things that we wear as academic monocles today. He started Phi Beta Kappa, and we became the first historically black institution to have a chapter of that organization. He was able to get a lot of his graduates into Harvard for graduate degrees, particularly the doctorate. Now, we called him Chief Courier. What he always boasted was his students, people who had majored, not the least of which was John Hope Franklin, Wade McCree, and people of that ilk who had gone on and made tremendous names for themselves and established reputations in the world at large. And after he retired, he stayed on and became like a father figure at the institution. When he passed, see, it was customary and still is that the passing of a professor usually brings the entire community together in memorial recognition of that professor. But his was postponed for almost 6 months. This white professor at this historically black institution. And when you learned why, it was because the people that he had educated was so prominent until they, in this club, Chief's Club, if you please, decided that some were in Ethiopia, some were in Europe, and they could not all get together until about 6 months, at which time they came to campus and each rose to say what that man had been in their lives. And I had never seen anything like that before for any professor, black, blue, white, or green. But it said that much of what our nation aspires for now had manifested itself at this place in this environment many, many years before it caught on anywhere. And so I think it stems back to the nurturing and beginning of how we started and how those early caretakers stayed on until we, if you please, grew up enough to maintain ourselves. And I think that's what you see that sets this place apart even today. In many ways, we accept the identity as an historical black institution. And many of the things we do right now, that line is blurred. It's not even identifiable because it's not who did it, but that it was done. And the products of it being done manifested in the work of our alumni. So it says.
And let's talk about, because I think you've got, I think you've mentioned one professor's students, but you've got a whole array of, well, and of course every individual is significant, and we understand that, etc. But you've got some very, very prominent individuals that you mark as your alumni that are nationally known and internationally known. Let's talk about some of those individuals and some of the experiences that you know in dealing with them.
Hazel O'Leary, class of '56, who served as Secretary of Energy, was a major, I think, in one of the social sciences there. John Lewis, who is a congressman from Georgia, graduated in the class of '67. A man by the name of Cornice Enix. Now that might not jump out at you as a household word.
It's a household word.
Yeah, but for us in Nashville, it is. The Enix family, his father was one of the first black lawyers in town. His younger brother, who passed away, was also a lawyer like his father. But Cornice was one of the first black heart transplant surgeons in the United States, and now has his own laboratory in California, I think connected with Berkeley, doing landmark research. These are just some examples of people that we've taught a long time ago and we're still teaching now. I point out to you that we have strong evidence that this will continue. We were just cited last year as the #1 university in the United States per capita that produces PhDs among African Americans in physics. That's almost colossal. So that the current custodians, which I claim I'm a part of, are simply carrying on this gigantic legacy that was established. They're finding amongst all of those rough stones these diamonds that we see going out doing what they're doing.
You know, Dr. Neeley, I think as a scientist, and one of the questions that we've always raised, and I think this is especially a question that you would welcome, let's have you to talk about the deficit that we have as African Americans in these areas of science. I think you indicated that as a physicist that you teach every day and et cetera, et cetera. Well, I think that it can also be pointed out that you almost have no alternative as a physicist because it would be very, very difficult to find another of you.
Well, we're rare.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, we're fairly rare breed.
You see, you are rare, and you as a scientist.
Part of that, Dr. Haney, I believe, is that we are victims too of believing what we read and believing what people say. It isn't so that you can look at the color of a man's skin and say he can or cannot do something. We fortunately, and I say this in all candor, fortunately I was trained in the South during segregation. And when I talk to audiences over the nation, particularly in majority audiences, they're almost astounded when I make a statement in the great days of segregated education. I mean by that I was exposed to the finest teachers this world could put. Yes, they were trapped in the same society for all of the same reasons. They should have been teaching at Harvard, but they couldn't teach at Harvard. So they taught me. Having never heard that I couldn't do, I never had a barrier that said I couldn't do physics. I just did it.
And so what would you tell our young people, 25 seconds before our commercial break, what would you tell our young people today?
Don't believe it, try it. Because you are capable. We do it every day at our place. 40% of our students major in science. So it can be done.
And so Fisk is doing a tremendous job in terms of helping within the framework of its influence to help deal with this deficit that we have. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this short commercial break.